Hey everyone, welcome back to Valley of Secrets. I'm your host, Nikki Ruth. Today's episode brings us back to 2009. It's early afternoon in Vancouver's Pacific Spirit Park. The kind of spring day we get here on the coast. Bright, cool, a little muddy on the trails. Dogs off leash, students out from the University of BC, runners weaving through trees, headphones in, eyes on the path. And somewhere on St. George's Trail, just steps from the park entrance near Southwest Marine Drive and Camosun Drive, a 53-year-old woman is running a route she knows by heart. She's done this for decades, through pregnancies, career changes, kids' swim practices, and ski races. Running is her reset button. She doesn't know that up ahead, hidden by the ferns and tall trees, someone is waiting. This is the story of Wendy Ladner-Beaudry. Wendy was born on April 6, 1956, to lawyer and war hero Thomas Ladner and his wife Janet. She was one of 6 children, 2 sisters and 3 brothers, growing up in Shaughnessy, one of Vancouver's most prestigious neighborhoods. According to multiple profiles, the Ladners were a well-known BC family whose roots ran deep in the region. Her great-grandfather helped found the community of Ladner, BC, a quiet, historic town along the south arm of the Fraser River, known for its farming heritage and century-old family histories. It's the kind of place where the Ladner name is woven into the landscape itself, and that legacy was part of Wendy's ancestry. One of her brothers, Peter Ladner, carried that prominence into modern Vancouver, eventually becoming a city councillor and mayoral candidate. So you can say that Wendy came from what some articles describe as kind of a quote-unquote minor royalty in Vancouver. But as several people who knew her have said, that's not really what defined her. Wendy had her own legacy through sports and being a mom and a wife. She was a high-performance athlete, a nationally ranked competitive swimmer, a member of senior field hockey teams in Ontario and BC, and eventually a world-class telemark skier. She even won a World Masters Championship. Friends describe her as one of those people who was always in motion, cycling, skiing, hiking, running, organizing big group trips. Vancouver Magazine paints this picture of overlapping circles of people: girlfriends and their kids on ski days in Whistler, Ladner family gatherings on Pasley Island, and cabin weekends on Nelson Island shared with World Cup skier Rob Boyd and his wife. And in the middle of all of those circles was Wendy, calling people, getting them together, dragging them into her adventures. Wendy was married to Michael Beaudry, a French-Canadian writer and extreme sports journalist she'd met windsurfing at Jericho. And together they had 2 daughters, Maya and Jenna. According to Vancouver Magazine, by the time she was 53 years old, she'd finally reached that strange in-between place a lot of parents know, including myself. One daughter at University of Montreal, the other nearing the end of high school. At home in Vancouver, she lived in a small bungalow on a dead-end street between Marine Drive and the Musqueam Reserve. She'd first bought it with her brother Steve when they were young, but over time, Steve moved out and she and Michael turned it into their family home. Vancouver Magazine reported that Wendy transformed the house using ideas from a pattern language, that 1970s design Bible about how spaces can feel warm and human. Her home wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a place where people gathered, where kids crashed after ski trips, where there was always another chair pulled up to the table. Professionally, she'd leveraged that lifelong love of sport and moved it into leadership roles. She completed a master's in education at UBC in her late 40s and started working with organizations focused on physical activity and access to sport. By the time she was 53, she was co-chair of the BC Games Society, a past board member of Sport BC, and chair of the Kids Sport Fund, a national charity that helps low-income kids participate in sport. She was also leading projects that used exercise as a way to build confidence, a community for women using food banks in Vancouver and Burnaby, with plans to expand to Surrey. So that's the person we're talking about here. A mother of two, a former elite athlete, a community builder who loved to run the trails of Pacific Spirit Park. And on April 3rd, 2009, that's exactly what she set out to do. It's a cool, bright April morning in Vancouver. One of those spring days where the air still feels crisp, but the sun finally has enough warmth to pull people outside. On the west side of the city, tucked between Marine Drive and the dense forest of Pacific Spirit Park, Wendy is beginning her Friday the same way she always begins so many others. She drives her younger daughter Jenna to school. There's nothing unusual about the drop-off, no strange cars in the neighborhood, no uneasy feeling, just a regular morning in a routine she's followed for years. When she pulls back into the driveway of the small bungalow she shares with her family, the house is quiet. She settles into her work for the day, emails, planning, the kind of community building sport work that's woven into her life. She answers messages, organizes upcoming projects, checks in on her commitments. By late morning, she's in that steady, focused rhythm of working from home. At 12:48 p.m., Wendy hits send on what will become the last email she ever writes. And not long after, she picks up the phone and calls her friend, twice, hoping to find a running partner for the afternoon. It's something she often tries to do, turn a workout into a social check-in, a chance to talk and move through the forest with someone she cares about. But the timing doesn't work. Her friend happens to be busy, so the run will have to be solo. For Wendy, that's never been a reason not to go. She changes into her running clothes, laces up her shoes, and leaves the house on foot. The entrance to St. George's Trail is only a few blocks away, close enough that she's walked or jogged this route thousands of times before. She knows every bend, every route, every dip in the path. Pacific Spirit Park isn't the kind of place you picture when you think of danger. It's not remote, and it's not abandoned. It's one of Vancouver's most loved urban forests, a massive stretch of green wrapped around University of British Columbia, with more than 70 kilometers of trails that runners, students, dog walkers, and families move through every single day. But Pacific Spirit has another personality too. One that's easy to forget until you're standing in the middle of it. The trees are tall and dense. The ferns grow waist high, and the trails twist just enough that a person can step a few feet off the path and disappear completely. You can be surrounded by people one moment and swallowed by silence the next. It's busy, but it's also full of pockets where you suddenly realize no one can see you. At some point shortly after 1 o'clock, Wendy steps off the pavement and onto the packed earth of the trail. The sky is bright, and the forest is awake with the dog walkers, students from the university, and locals out for their lunchtime run. It's the kind of scene where women feel comfortable putting in headphones, where people give each other nods as they pass, where the risk feels low enough because the world is right there. But somewhere between the moment Wendy enters that trail and the late afternoon, everything changes. Investigators believe the attack happens between noon and 3 p.m. There is no indication that Wendy sensed any danger beforehand. No witness who saw a confrontation, no warning. just a violent encounter hidden in a pocket of forest only meters from the main path. At around 3 p.m., a person walking St. George's Trail comes around a quiet bend not far from the trailhead. They notice something on the ground, a flash of color where there shouldn't be one. As they step closer, the shape resolves into a human body, a woman lying face down just off the path. She's not moving, and she's bloodied. The hiker immediately calls 911. When news of the attack reaches police radios, the response is instant. Pacific Spirit Park, this enormous living forest wrapped around the university, suddenly becomes a controlled, methodical crime scene. Within minutes of the 911 call, the first RCMP officer from the UBC detachment arrive on St. George's Trail. They follow the hiker's direction down the narrow path, past the ferns and tree roots until they reach the spot where Wendy lies. The officers do what they can in those first moments. They secure the area, move civilians back, and take in the details. But it's clear almost immediately that this is far beyond a local file. This is a homicide, violent, deliberate, and committed in broad daylight. So the call goes out to IHIT, the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, and that's when everything shifts. Investigators fan out through the woods in coordinated formation. You can picture it. Boots crushing the underbrush, neon vests weaving through the trees, methodically sweeping the ground for anything. Fabric, a weapon, footprints in the mud. Canine handlers work their dogs along the trails, hoping for a scent. And above them, a police helicopter circles, barely visible through the canopy, but loud enough that everyone in the area knows something serious has happened. They search the ravines, the side paths, even the access points that back onto Marine Drive. They talk to anyone still in the park, joggers who passed through that afternoon, people walking their dogs, and students who may have cut through the forest between classes. Investigators ask the same questions over and over. Did you see a woman running alone? Did you notice anyone following someone? Did you see anything that seemed out of place? Did you hear anything, even something you dismissed? Back at the UBC RCMP detachment, Wendy's family has been brought in and are processing the shock that feels like it came out of nowhere. They had been told she'd gone running, and they had expected her to come home. And now they're in a small room, hearing that the injuries are so severe that identification requires more than a photograph. Meanwhile, investigators begin restructuring Wendy's last steps. They know she sent an email at 12:48 p.m. They know she tried to reach a friend about running. They know the entrance to St. George's Trail is a straight shot from her house. What they don't know is the most important part. Who was in the woods waiting for her? Meanwhile, IHIT builds a list of persons of interest. Not suspects, just people with any connection to the park, the neighborhood, similar cases, or Wendy's world. Over time, that list grows to over 300 names. They check all of their alibis, and they review offenders known to use the park systems. They chase down every tip, some promising, but many were not. Wendy's husband, Ladner-Beaudry, becomes an early focus. Not because police found evidence pointing at him, but because that's how homicide investigations work. You start with the people closest to the victim. It's procedure. But the public doesn't see the nuance. They just see speculation. Michael had last seen his wife during a brief stop at home, one of those in-between moments where life feels rushed and scattered. He'd flown back from Europe on March 31st. He'd been there on a work trip, part of his long career writing about skiing and the extreme sports world. Travel was nothing unusual for him, and assignments often took him across the continent and overseas. Exhausted and jet-lagged, Michael barely had time to settle at home before heading out again. He hadn't planned to leave so soon. But a week earlier, the extreme sports world had been shaken. His friend Shane McConkey had died after a jump gone wrong in the Italian Dolomites. A memorial was being held at Dusty's Bar in Whistler, BC on April 2nd, and Michael felt he needed to be there. Even with the exhaustion of travel and the fact that Wendy's birthday was waiting to be celebrated back home, he drove north for a single day on the mountain. He skied all day with his friend Binti Massey, then joined everyone at Dusty's Bar that night to honor a man they'd all respected. The next morning, April 3rd, the day Wendy was killed, Michael spent time with Wendy's sister Ginny, the first member of the Ladner family he'd ever grown close to when he moved to Vancouver from Quebec in the 1970s. They talked, caught up, moved through the easy, familiar pattern of family conversation. It was an ordinary morning. Nothing signaled the rupture that was coming. At around 2:30 that afternoon, Michael called home from Whistler, and he got no answer. So he left a quick message letting Wendy know he was on his way back to Vancouver. As he crossed the Lionsgate Bridge, his phone rang. This time, it was their daughter Jenna, sounding irritated and confused, stating that her mom didn't pick her up from swim practice, which she always did. And then, something worse. When she got home, the house alarm hadn't been set. That immediately set off alarms in Michael's mind. Their block had always struggled with petty crime. Cars had been broken into, their own had been stolen once, and Wendy's skis had disappeared years earlier. Just a week before, her car had been broken into again, and her laptop had been stolen for a second time. Wendy took safety seriously, and she set the alarm every time she left the house. Jenna knew the rule. If you came home and the alarm wasn't on, you didn't go inside. And now here she is, standing outside the house alone, waiting for someone to tell her what to do. Michael's stomach tightened. He knew something was terribly wrong. He drove the rest of the way in a blur, and when he reached the neighborhood, he told Jenna to grab her bike, and the two of them headed towards Pacific Spirit Park, just 5 blocks away. If Wendy was out running, she would have been on those trails, and they knew it. But as they turned onto the street leading toward the trailhead, they saw it. Police tape stretching across the entrance, officers clustered around the pass, flashing of emergency lights breaking through the trees. Michael didn't need to ask a single question. He knew it. He said, quote, "I knew when I saw the tape. I knew it was Wendy. I knew she was dead," end quote. Now, the alarm being off at the house was terrifying for Wendy's family because it was so unlike her to not set it. But investigators never believed she was taken from the home. All evidence pointed to Wendy leaving for her run that afternoon and being attacked while inside the park, not before. We don't really know why Wendy didn't set the alarm that day. Maybe she just simply forgot, or maybe she knew she wouldn't be that long. Nobody really knows. Since police could confirm Michael's alibi, investigators officially cleared him. They closed that chapter, and they told him he was not a suspect. Still, rumors spread. Online threads picked apart his grief. People who had never met him posted theories, and the family had to navigate not only the sudden loss of Wendy, but the avalanche of suspicion aimed at a man who'd already been ruled out by the people actually doing the work. By September of that year, police told Michael that they had exhausted their early leads, which is detective talk for something everyone dreads hearing. We're not close, not yet. And from that point on, the investigation becomes a long, slow burn. Revisiting tips, re-interviewing trail users, reviewing evidence, rebuilding timelines, and coming back to the forest again and again with new eyes, hoping that this time something stands out. But as the months pass, one truth settles in like fog. This case is not going to solve itself quickly, and whoever was out there on that trail with Wendy has not made a mistake big enough to bring themselves into the light. People return. The forest goes back to pretending it's untouched. But for investigators and for Wendy's family, the silence is its own kind of wound. And the question that started on that bright spring afternoon remains the question that still hangs over Pacific Spirit Park more than 15 years later. How does a woman disappear into a trail she's run for decades and never come home without anyone seeing the person who did it? When a case sits unsolved for months, then years, then more than a decade, the silence begins to fill with theories. Some come from investigators, some from criminologists, and some from people who know the park intimately. Some, the most human ones, come from friends and family trying to make sense of something that has no obvious answer. So none of these theories have been confirmed. None have led to an arrest. But together they form the framework people return to again and again when they try to understand what happened on that forest trail. So let's walk through them carefully, starting with the one investigators hinted at early on, a random stranger on the trail attack. This is the theory both police and Wendy's husband Michael have publicly acknowledged as possible, maybe even likely. Pacific Spirit Park is busy, yes, but it's also a place where visibility comes and goes in seconds. High ferns, tight bends, soft ground. You could be surrounded by people 1 minute and completely alone the next. And if someone wanted to attack a lone runner, they wouldn't need an elaborate plan. They'd only need timing. Investigators said early on that this homicide may have been a random act of violence, and Michael has echoed that belief in interviews. He doesn't think Wendy knew her killer, and he doesn't think she had any enemies. He believes this was an unmotivated, opportunistic attack carried out by someone she had never met. It's horrifying because randomness strips away the comfort of explanation. It means the motive wasn't personal, it wasn't revenge, and it wasn't targeted. And for many people, including women who run that park, this is the theory that lodged deepest into their bones. Another theory was it was a targeted attack disguised to look like it was random. This is a more unsettling, less supported theory that suggests the opposite. What if someone did intend to harm Wendy? This idea usually comes from people who look at her connections, her work with high-level sport organizations, her prominent family name, the Ladner's long-standing role in Vancouver's civic landscape, and her brother's dealings with being city councillor and mayoral candidate. People ask it whether professional or personal conflicts could have been brewing under the surface. But when you look closely, this theory weakens quickly. Wendy was widely loved. She wasn't involved in scandals, she wasn't entangled in business disputes, and she didn't have a history of conflicts or behaviors that raised the usual red flags in targeted homicides. And investigators have never suggested she had an identifiable enemy. In fact, police cleared the one person who statistically tends to be scrutinized first, her husband, very early on. What also works against the targeted hit narrative is the location. If someone wanted to kill her discreetly and quickly, they wouldn't choose a busy public park in the middle of the day. They wouldn't choose a trail where runners pass every few minutes. They wouldn't choose a setting where escape routes are unpredictable. So while some people cling to this idea because randomness feels too terrifying, there is no evidence supporting this theory, and it's the least grounded of all the possibilities. Another theory is that there could have been a transient killer or a short-term resident. This is a theory that doesn't get as much attention, but quietly makes the most logistical sense. Because Pacific Spirit Park borders the University of British Columbia, one of the largest universities in the country, with tens of thousands of students, international visitors, exchange researchers, contracted workers, seasonal staff, and temporary residents in campus housing. People come and go constantly. If the person who attacked Wendy was not known to her, not a Vancouver resident, not someone who stayed in the city, and not someone with a criminal record in Canada, then they could have slipped out of the province or the country before police even knew who they were looking for. Forensic databases wouldn't catch them, local canvassing wouldn't find them, and media coverage wouldn't reach them. And once you leave Canada, investigators lose access to countless international records unless there's a match or a reason to look. This theory doesn't offer clean emotional answers, but it does fit the geography and it fits the demographics. It also fits the eerie emptiness investigators found when they combed through the tips in the weeks following the murder. Sometimes the simplest story is the hardest to swallow. The killer may have simply left. Police have never publicly revealed how Wendy was killed or whether the murder involved sexual assault. Those details have been held back intentionally. Information investigators keep private so that they can verify a confession or match evidence if a suspect ever is identified. But when I think about this case, I can't help wondering about motive. A brutal attack on a woman running alone in the middle of the day often raises the question of sexual violence. And part of me wants to believe there had to be some kind of a motive, something more than a person simply waiting in the trees to attack a stranger. Maybe that's my mind trying to make sense of something that's senseless. The truth is, we can't know what was going through the head of the attacker. What we can assume is that police processed the scene thoroughly and would have submitted any usable biological evidence to Canada's National DNA Databank. The fact that no match has ever been reported suggests the attacker wasn't somebody already in the system. And that is what makes the theory of a transient offender feel more plausible. Another theory is that it could have been someone who knew her pattern. Wendy had been running those same trails for more than 30 years. Same entry point, same time of day, same rhythm of a woman who lived close enough to lace up and disappear into the forest whenever she wanted. In a place like Pacific Spirit, you don't need to know someone personally to recognize their habits. You just need to be present often enough. It could have been a regular dog walker, a regular cyclist, a regular student who's cutting through the park between classes. Anyone who frequented those trails could have noticed Wendy's pattern without meaning to, or with meaning to. This theory doesn't suggest the attacker was waiting necessarily for Wendy. It does suggest that they may be waiting for a woman like Wendy, so someone running alone, someone predictable, and someone who appeared at roughly the same time on the same trail. It doesn't require stalking or premeditation. It only requires familiarity with the space. In a forest where you can feel surrounded one moment and visible the next, that small bit of predictability might have been all it took. When someone dies the way Wendy did, suddenly, violently, in a place she trusted, the story can easily collapse into the crime, into the fear, and into the unanswered questions. Wendy's legacy is bigger than the moment that took her life. It stretches far beyond a trail in Pacific Spirit Park. It lives in the communities she shaped, the people she held close, and the work she poured herself into. For decades, she carved out space in British Columbia for people, especially young people and women, to move, to discover their strength, and to belong. Through the BC Games Society, Sport BC, and Kids Sport, Wendy helped create opportunities for kids whose families couldn't afford to put them in sport. That wasn't a footnote in her life. That was her through line. She believed in access, in empowerment. And then there's her family. Her daughters, Maya and Jenna, grew up surrounded by a mother who refused to let life shrink around them. She packed their childhood with adventure and joy. Every person who speaks of Wendy's mentions her girls. They were her pride, her heartbeat, her purpose. And even though they're adults now, even though they've built lives of their own, they still talk about her with a softness that makes it clear. Her presence did not end in 2009. It threads through who they became. Her siblings carry her legacy in quieter ways, and the way they speak about her, and the memorials they've helped maintain, and the determination to keep her case alive, to make sure the public knows that Wendy was more than a mystery in a park. She was a human being with a big life, a joyful life. a woman who loved deeply and was deeply loved. And then there's another legacy, one that's harder and heavier. Wendy's death changed the way runners move through Pacific Spirit Park. It changed the way women think about public spaces, and it opened up conversations about safety, visibility, and the silent risks women navigate every day. Her case didn't just resonate, it shifted behavior. People still talk about that. They still say her name when they loop that trail. They still pause at certain bends in the path and think of her. But perhaps the most profound piece of her legacy isn't fear, it's persistence. For 16 years and counting, Wendy's family has shown up on anniversaries, renewing a private reward, standing in front of cameras, and reminding Vancouver that this case is still open. They refuse to let her story be buried beneath newer headlines, and they refuse to let the trail go quiet. What they've built through grief, through exhaustion, through a hope that refuses to die is a legacy of insistence. A legacy that demands justice even when justice feels far away. A legacy that says we will not stop, not until we know who did this. Investigators and Wendy's family hold out hope every day that her killer will be caught. They believe someone must have heard or seen something, and they urge people to come forward with any information, no matter how small you think it is, because it could help solve this case. If you have any information about the murder of Wendy Ladner-Beaudry, even something you think is small, please contact the BC RCMP Major Crime Tip Line at 778-290-5291. If you prefer to remain anonymous, you can call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477 or submit a tip at solvecrime.ca. Thank you for listening to Valley of Secrets. Your support means the world to me. Please follow me on Instagram or Facebook at Valley of Secrets Podcast. And if these stories resonate with you, please consider sharing the podcast on your social media platforms. If you feel inclined, leaving a 5-star rating helps more people find these stories. You can also choose to donate a small amount each month to help keep this podcast going. The link is in the bottom of the show notes. I will see you all next week. Until then, stay safe, stay aware, and stay curious.